I often ask myself whether I prefer Diane Chambers or Rebecca Howe. And I genuinely can't answer that question. When I started watching Cheers, I thought I'd like Frasier, which I definitely do, and that I'd be completely in love with Kirstie Alley's character. She is not in it yet, but she does come into it very soon. But I didn't know if I'd really connect with any of the other characters. My thoughts were very misguided because I absolutely love all of them. And in particular, I am very fond of Diane, largely because I see a lot of myself in her, a lot of my negative qualities I see reflected in Diane, but I love her. So whenever we have any episode that focuses on Diane, I know it's going to make my heart sing, and Dance, Diane, Dance is no exception. This is the 12th episode of the 5th season of Cheers, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and as always, there will be huge spoilers from now as I talk about everything that happens in the episode and share some thoughts. I have quite a few notes, a couple of quotes that I want to share, but generally, I thought it was a beautiful episode. I don't love the ending, but I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it, but I'll talk about that when we get there. It starts off with a very brief intro with Woody hanging from the TV because it had a bad reception, completely unrelated to the rest of the episode, but a nice way to start things off. We then have the main narrative established pretty quickly. Diane worries that she's left the stove on and she's deliberating whether she wants to go back home and check or not. And while she's trying to work out what to do, Sam tells her that while she was upstairs at Melville's, Madame Likova called. And we don't know who this is. Sam doesn't know who this is. And eventually, after not a lot of probing, Diane reveals that Madame Likova is a teacher. She's actually been studying ballet. And I didn't write any of them down, but we have a lot of great wit from everybody around her. We have Carla in particular, Norm's there, and Sam and Frasier, and Diana's going on and on about it, and Carla only manages to make her come back down to her reality by reminding her that her apartment might be burning down. Off Diane goes. Cliff comes in. The story with Cliff is very brief. I feel like they could have maybe done a tiny bit more with it. He's bought a new car. He's trying to sell his current car with some pretty clever, I guess, advertising techniques or attention-grabbing techniques, basically putting a fake photo on the poster to advertise his car. It's a nice little bit of variety to bring Cliff into it, but we don't really get anything else beyond that. The rest of it is all about Diane. And a character called Leeza comes in. She's played by Marilyn Lightstone. She's actually Madame Likova's student, and she's brought the tape of Diane's final performance with Madame Likova's notes, and she basically did this to be kind to Diane because had Madame Likova brought them, it would have been a bitter experience because she would have told Diane exactly how she felt. And we learn quite quickly that the feedback is not kind, and everybody decides to watch the tape. Diane's not there, of course. And honestly, when they said the VCR in Sam's office, I assumed, I don't remember if I felt this the first time I watched this episode, but I couldn't remember what happened. And when I watched it again just now, I assumed they meant they'd watch it in Sam's office, not that they'd put it on the television in the bar for the entire bar to see. It definitely worked very well. And Cliff very harshly describes it to a traffic accident where you don't want to look, but you can't help looking at it. And they realise that Diane is going to be absolutely devastated. And I think Frasier in this episode, a little bit of Sam as well, but very much Frasier was very mindful of Diane's feelings. And he suggests writing and I quote, splendid analysis on Madame Likova's behalf and replacing it with the original analysis. And that's what we do. And Diane comes in a little later and her apartment hadn't burned down. Thank goodness. She did leave the milk out. And she reads the analysis and she's overjoyed. And she decides to call Madame Likova to thank her for the kind words. And so everybody's kind of stepping away from the bar because they're worried they're about to be found out. And Sam actually scrambles over the bar. It's quite delightful. And fortunately for everybody, Madame Likova basically hangs up the phone pretty quickly, so nothing is revealed. And they kind of encourage her to watch the tape, mostly Carla encouraging her to watch the tape, watch the performance. And there's this beautifully shot moment. It is gorgeously framed when we have a close-up of Diane. she's looking up at the TV, and Shelley Long's face is just the most beautiful thing ever. The smile is so gorgeous. But over her shoulders, we I promise it's funny. It might actually be either the thumbnail for this video or at least on the card on the screen. But we have Cliff over her left shoulder with his head in his hand, and Frasier over her right shoulder with just the most horrified expression, with Diane in the middle just grinning from ear to ear, and it's just... It's beautiful. It's perfect. It is absolutely fantastic. And then Norm had me howling with laughter because Diane said, while watching the tape, ever since I was a child, I wanted to dance so badly. And Norm replies, it looks like you got your wish, which is so mean, but it was so quick. And Sam kind of gives him a little hit on the arm, which I thought was really lovely, because he's kind of saying, hey, don't make fun of her, which is really sweet. And I rather enjoyed that quite a lot. We then have an interesting scene immediately afterwards, just Diane and Norm in the bar, and that doesn't happen that often. This is right at closing time. Vera is having a Tupperware party, apparently, so Norm's deciding he's not going home yet, and we actually have quite a moving conversation between Diane and Norman, a conversation that really helps move the final part of the episode. And they start to wonder, well, Diane wonders about what might have been, and they start to talk about dreams, again, mostly Diane doing the talking. And Norm says, though, and I quote, and I have a couple of quotes here, and Norm says, life's tough enough without getting yourself all worked up about something that's not going to happen. Dreams, they just give you heartache. And I think he has a valid point to an extent. I think expectations give heartache. I don't think dreams cause heartache, but having too high an expectation, particularly if you're an overachiever, if you're constantly trying to achieve a height that might not even exist, that can lead to heartache. And I think that that's the difference. And I think it's important to kind of distinguish between the two. High expectations can lead to heartache. Dreams, not necessarily, but I can see where he's coming from. And then Diane responds, but isn't the real heartache knowing that you had the potential to do something and you never tried? And I agree. I don't think I have any real regrets in life in terms of missed opportunities. But there are certain things where I wish I'd tried something or done something and the moment has passed and it's no longer an opportunity. So I think that that's definitely a really big takeaway from this episode. Diane realises, after her profound conversation with Norm, that she's going to pursue her dream. She's going to send the tape to Boston Ballet, and she lets Norm lock up, and we have another beautiful quote from Norm, and it's a wonderful moment because it's something we never ever see. Two things we never see here, actually. Norm alone in Cheers, but also Norm behind the bar. I rather enjoyed it. Then the next thing we see is Diane coming into Cheers dressed in this gorgeous bright blue. She's doing stretches at the bar, and it turns out the Boston Ballet didn't actually open the tape that she sent. They just returned it to her unopened, and she's decided she's going to go down there instead, and she's going to show them what she can do. And she then believes that Frasier and Sam are planning a surprise party for her. I feel like that's definitely very Diane. Rather than thinking that something negative is happening, she's thinking they're being suspicious because of a pleasant surprise. Very, very Diane. And I think she has a very admirable, if unrealistic, way of approaching things a lot of the time. They beg her to stay. She doesn't. She's going to follow her dreams. Then she ends up walking on the stage during a rehearsal. How did she get in the building? I have no idea. And then she starts to talk about this dream. And she says, and I quote, "Is that all there is to art? Mere technique?" And I think that that's actually really important because there are many people who call themselves artists who might not have technical skill. But does that mean they're any less of an artist? I guess the difference is technical skill can create a professional artist, whereas a lack of technical skill can maybe create a passionate artist, but not somebody who's likely to make a career out of it. And then she said something a little less profound. Judge me not by what my arms and legs are doing. And I think that's quite telling because I think Diane is clearly saying there, I know I'm not a brilliant dancer. And even though she believes everything that her dance teacher said, or what she thought she said. I think deep down she knows she's not brilliant at this, but she's not going to let that get in her way, and I rather admire that. And then Frasier walks onto the stage, and he whispers something to Diane, and we see her expression changing, and she looks back at Sam, who's in the wings. He nods to her, clearly confirming whatever it is Frasier has just said, and she leaves the stage. And the last thing we see is Diane looking out at the stage from the wings at the dancers, and it only lasts a couple of seconds. And on the one hand, I can see what they were going for, but on the other, I don't love that as an ending, and I don't know why. Part of me thinks it's because I don't like seeing Diane so deflated and so defeated, but I just feel like we needed one more scene, or even just a brief moment to wrap things up. It's not so much that it feels unfinished, but I did feel like I was left wanting more, which kind of sounds contradictory, but I can't exactly say what I'd want to happen next. So maybe that's not a fair thing for me to say if I can't offer a viable alternative, but I just can't help feeling that it's not a perfect ending for me. But nevertheless, that aside, it is a gorgeous, gorgeous episode, and Diane is just fabulous. I probably shouldn't say that, actually, when I started this off by saying I see a lot of myself in Diane. That's probably not a good way to top and tail this discussion. Either way, I love her. I love Shelley Long. Pretty much every episode that focuses on Diane is one that's going to really speak to my heart, and this one is absolutely no exception. Beautiful, beautiful episode. Dance, Diane, dance is rather splendid.